I'm here with the legendary Bill Hillgrove. He just retired as the Steelers broadcaster of 30 years. He calls Pitt basketball and football. How are we doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you, Nate?
I'm doing great. It's great to have you here in the presence. It's an honor, and to have you here, it means a lot.
Well, thank you. I've been kind of lucky along the way to basically be in the right place at the right time. And, any advice that I would give to young people like yourself in regards to, this crazy profession of broadcasting, be yourself, be prepared, and be ready, because you never know when that call is coming. And fortunately, in 1994, I got a call from the Pittsburgh Steelers saying we need a play-by-play guy. And I said, well, that sounds like an interesting life, full-time play-by-play man. Pitt Football and Basketball. Then I added the Steelers to the portfolio, and here it is 30 years later, and now I'm just cutting back to Pitt. Can't go from 100 miles an hour to zero. You got to go to 50 first.
That is very true. And I think your story of how you ended up as the Steelers broadcaster is interesting. They used your tape to compare to other people, and I think that's very interesting. How did that come about?
I didn't submit the tape. Somehow they had a tape of a Pitt broadcast, I assume. And the more Dan Rooney listened to it, the more he thought that maybe their guy was right in the city. And I think he turned to somebody and said, let's go with a guy we know. And, it was a good break for me, because at the time I was happy with my full-time television job with the ABC outlet in Pittsburgh, and also, the radio for Pitt. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense that becoming a full-time radio guy was probably better for my long-term career than the television news and television sports area. Because, as you well know, with the advent and the blooming and blossoming of ESPN, local TV sports is kind of like they're in a land of we don't know what we want to do. And to the point where there's some major market TV stations right now that don't have a sports department, because they figure if you're interested in sports, you'll watch ESPN, which there may be some validity to that, but I'm glad I'm doing radio. It's much more comfortable for me.
That makes sense. And I think before you got to Pitt and before the Steelers, your story of how you started, I heard on the Steelers, The Standard, you started in your bedroom with a nice little radio station, WHIL. How'd that work?
Well, my dad was an electrician, and he tinkered with radios and TVs, and he bought me a wireless mic that would play my voice through the speaker system. And that's how we got WHIL. I put it on the bedroom door, and the kids would play ball in my backyard, and I'd describe what they were doing. And I guess from that young age, I pretty much had figured out what I wanted to do for my career, and it's worked out very well. I've been, like I say, knock on wood, very lucky.
Well, you've excelled at it through your longevity, and I've enjoyed hearing your voice on the radio. The way you paint a picture for a fan that is not there is excellent. You tell them what snap is going to happen even before. Now, how do you paint the picture for a fan that is not at the game or listening at home? How did you develop that over time?
Well, I always thought that I'm talking to one person. I don't think about how many hundreds or thousands of people may be tuned in. I want to convey this thought from my mind into your mind as that person on the other end of the bargain. And, I think that's served me well for a lot of reasons. Certainly the most important thing is it is basic communication. I see something and I paint the picture for those who are not watching. Some of my most favorite reaction and positive reaction has come from sightless people who say, you give me, you make that game come to life. Well, if I can do it for them, then for somebody who's sighted, I can probably do the same thing. It's called theater of the mind, and that's, again, why I like radio.
Now, you recently celebrated 50 years with Pitt, And you got to start in 1969, and you've continued throughout your career. What's been your favorite Pitt basketball call you've made and your favorite Pitt football call you've made over the years?
Well, the favorite Pitt football call is quite easy. That's when Tony Dorsett broke Archie Griffin's rushing record. He couldn't have picked a better venue than the Navy Marine Corps Stadium because of all the tradition there. But, they only fire that cannon for the mids. Well, when he got into the end zone on that 33-yard pitch out and broke the record, they fired the Navy cannon. And at that point, the whole brigade of midshipmen doffed their caps. And to me, it was one of the most emotional moments I've ever been part of. And to add to the emotion, his parents got out of the stands and walked around the outside of the field. And as they walked by the mids, the doffing of the caps, and I lost it. I couldn't talk. I had tears running down my cheeks, and I turned to my partner, Johnny Sauer, for help. And I realized that he's got tears running down his cheeks. And then it kind of hits you. You're looking at a once-in-a-lifetime athlete and a once-in-a-lifetime moment. And it's one that I'll forever cherish.
That's October.
Basketball, Nate, let me think. There have been so many, game-winning shots. I remember Pitt playing West Virginia one year when Bob Huggins was still the coach, and it was was it at the Peterson Event Center or the Field House? I have to think about it. But anyhow, the venue is not important. What's important is that the whole time out before Pitt's possession, and they had come back from 7 down in like a minute 20 left, and now they have a chance to win the game. And Huggins told his team, don't let Ronald Ramon touch the basketball. Well, we made 2 passes, and all of a sudden, here comes Ramon from the left wing. As he got the ball, Huggins turned and walked toward the tunnel. He didn't even watch the ball go through the hoop because he knew what was coming. And it was a big victory for Pitt. That was one of the great moments. And the other was after years of frustration, Pitt finally winning the Big East tournament. They did it against UConn. And I remember walking out of the Garden, we go by Jim Calhoun, who was being interviewed by a New Haven station. And he stopped the interview and turned to Dick Grote and myself and said, Dick, Bill, congratulations, which showed me, aside to Jim Calhoun, that he didn't let a lot of people see. He's one of those feisty coaches that has a bench demeanor that's, like I say, it's high emotion. And that told me a lot about him, and also the fact that you win with class and you lose with class. And I think that's a great lesson as well.
I think when it comes to the Steelers, I watched the standard episode the other day that the Steelers put on their YouTube channel. And to hear you describe the Santonio Holmes catch in the end zone, you couldn't see Santonio. What emotions were brought when you seen Santonio Holmes toe tap that catch for the Super Bowl win?
Nate, I have a confession to make. I didn't see his feet. I had trouble seeing Antonio, because we're on the other side of the field, and that's at the opposite end of the stadium. But the late Ed Conway, who was one of my mentors and Pitt's play-by-play man when I first got involved as a color assistant back in 1970, he told me one thing I've never forgotten: watch the official. So I can't see Santonio. There are 3 defenders, one of whom I think was number 47, a safety, went up, and the ball cleared his hands by maybe 6 inches. And I'm locked on the official. When I saw the official's hands come up to his hips, then I knew they were coming all the way up, and I called touchdown, and I was very proud of that call because it was totally dependent on somebody else's view of the play. I couldn't see Santonio, let alone his feet.
Santonio was one of those receivers I watched as a kid that I just loved the way he played. And the Steelers being a wide receiver production, I have a list of wide receivers here that I'd want you to rank. I have Hines Ward, Lynn Swann, Antonio Brown, Mike Wallace, Santonio Holmes, and John Stallworth. If you had to rank those receivers, how would you rank them?
Okay, Stallworth number 1. Did more after the catch than most receivers ever get a chance to. Swann number 2. Swann deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because he changed the art of receiving. He was the first receiver I remember who went and got footballs, not just didn't catch them, went and got them. And his ballet training and his ability to control his body, all those things factored in. Number 3, that's a tough one. Gosh. I think it's a toss-up. I really do. Antonio Brown. And it's a shame what he's done to not only himself, but his career. I think a Hall of Fame career is being wasted because he certainly has the ability. And what I remember from watching him in practices, he was the first one there and the last one to leave. His work ethic was never questioned. But somehow he got off the rails, and, it's really hurt him. And I really feel badly about that because he has Hall of Fame credentials. But unfortunately, because of what's happened to him recently, he probably won't get the chance.
That is an unfortunate part about Antonio Brown, because for me, growing up as I was young, I got to watch not only him begin. He had that crazy catch against the Baltimore Ravens off his helmet, and to see what he did over production and to get to this peak. I think he had 6 years where he just outproduced guys like Julio Jones, even a big name like Calvin Johnson. And I would agree, because Antonio Brown has those credentials. Just how will his view of what he did after affect how long it takes him to get in? And
I kind of shake my head over the whole thing because, like I say, he's got the ability, he had the work ethic, he's got the credentials, but because of many off the field activities, and one of the on the field that didn't help him was quitting on was it the Patriots or what? No, it was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he walked out during a game.
yeah,
that doesn't help your resume at all in the eyes of voters. And let's face it, the Hall of Fame, it's like any other beauty contest. The beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and so it's wonderful to get that honor. It is pro football's highest honor, but it depends on somebody else's opinion. And like I say, it's a beauty contest, and some win, some lose.
I want to speak about TJ Watt, because TJ Watt is on another level. I personally feel like he got robbed last year for Defensive Player of the Year because he puts out
again a beauty contest. In other words, somebody else, you can't let that get you off of your game. And to me, his game is right at the top. He studies. He's relentless. He's talented. He has so many ways to attack a quarterback. Some of his peers, including I think the person who won it, are kind of one-dimensional in comparison. And he has inside moves, outside moves, the chop. The guy has the complete game, and he's in his prime. And he didn't win it this past year; he'll win it again.
I think the ability of him getting through a double and triple team, like you can chip him, you can bring an extra guy on the side, but the way he can use his finesse, his chop, he just gets to the quarterback and allows his mate, Alex Highsmith, on the other side to win as well. And when you have two guys like that coming off the edge, I think that allows guys like Cam Hayward and the team to really get going. And I think the Steelers, since drafting Highsmith from Charlotte, has allowed him to really not only put attention on both sides, but you still can't focus on TJ Watt like you want to.
No, he and Alex have regular meetings at the quarterback. And I think that's, to me, if you're a defensive coordinator, that's what you want every snap. But I remember him talking about, I choose which hand I use to go after the ball depending on where the quarterback has the ball. And just the way he explained everything, I said, this guy's got it down to a science. Okay. And when you take that talent and that relentlessness and combine it with science, he's virtually unstoppable.
Where would you rank TJ Watt within Steelers defensive players all time? Because there's been so many good ones. You have guys like James Harrison, Mean Joe Green. Where does he rank in your all-time Steelers defensive players?
Nobody can surpass what Joe Green did. Joe Green almost single-handedly changed the culture of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were lovable losers for 4 decades. And he enters the picture, and he almost single-handedly, that refused to lose attitude, he made his teammates feel that and believe it. But nobody can ever surpass Joe Green. T.J. Watt's right behind. And James Harrison. They've had so many. How about Dracula in cleats, Jack Lambert? Here was a 218-pound kid that probably wouldn't survive in any weightlifting contest. Probably wouldn't win many races, foot races, but he played football at the very highest level because of his will to play great football. And boy, those guys are tough to replace. I think when you say in describing somebody that he's a football player, I think you issue the ultimate compliment. And it doesn't matter what position. Football players are in a class by themselves. Mike Tomlin once said to me, "Billy, you think it's within human nature to want to run full speed into another human being?" He said it takes a very select few and a few who really survive and thrive on that idea. I use myself as an example. Somebody said, "Did you play football?" I said, "I had a bad back. I had a yellow streak about that wide going right up the middle of it." Like I say, it takes a certain few to play that game well.
How is it to work with guys up in the booth? Like you had Myron Cope, you had Tunch Ilkin, you had Missy Matthews on the sideline. What is it like to work with those type of people?
Well, they are fellow professionals. They have a role. I have a role. And I think professionals respect each other's roles. And in the case of Myron, it was easy. I was his straight man. I did the nuts and bolts, and then he took color to a new level with a capital C. But it wasn't analysis so much as it was color. And he brought more color and more fun to the game than probably any other person I've worked with. In contrast, Tunch Ilkin, who played the game at a high level up front, taught me that most games are won and lost in the trenches, that you can have all the skill in the world and the greatest passer and the greatest receiver, but it doesn't happen unless those people up front do their jobs. And I think that's the essence of football. 11 people working for one goal. And you can call it the ultimate team sport. I'll go along with that, because if 10 people don't do their job, you don't score. And that's why sometimes these end zone celebrations, unless they're team celebrations, the I, me, mine, look what I just did attitude, I don't like that. The team took the ball into the end zone, and don't you dare forget that.
Yeah, it takes those 5 guys up front to allow people like Najee Harris to score, Jaylen Warren to score. It allows, even for people like George Pickens, people don't realize the quarterback doesn't get the ball out unless those 5 guys give him the pocket to throw those passes. And reverse it, Nate, on defense. If those guys up front aren't doing their jobs, the back 7 have no chance. So if an interception happens, chances are, if you look at the film, somebody up front did an outstanding job to force that interception, that situation. It's, like I say, the ultimate team game. It's 11 against 11. No other sport can claim that. That's why a lot of times you ask a coach, what do you think of the play? I have to go look at it. I have the worst seat in the house. I have to go look at the footage to see exactly who did their job well to make it possible. I think with Mike Tomlin, he gets a lot of criticism, but the way he handles his team, no matter what situation happens, I think that's a testament to how good he actually is. And I'm a big fan of Mike Tomlin. He might make a decision once in a while where I'm like, I'm not sure, but he is ultimately one of the best coaches in the NFL right now.
He is a bright man. That cerebral approach to football is always there. And I think with that ability, that mental ability has allowed him to do is to take 53 different people and treat them all as individuals. In other words, there is no one way that a coach can treat a player. Some players demand a pat on the back, some demand a scolding, Some might even invite you to choke them. I say that kiddingly, but that, and I think Tomlin has the ability to read people and treat them in that regard. So to me, he without question, he's on his way to the Hall of Fame. And give the Steelers credit, 3 Hall of Fame coaches in a row. Not too many teams can make that claim.
17 non-losing seasons, I believe it is. That's just an impressive record by itself, because it takes not only just the 53, but the whole coaching staff to make that possible. Like last year, you had guys like Miles Jack coming off retirement to come back and play. Michael Walker, who was off the practice squad, came up. He was working with Eric Rowe, a safety that they signed. He went to the practice squad. And the fact that Mike Tomlin can make those situations work, I personally believe that's what can put a Hall of Fame coach like Mike Tomlin above a lot.
Yeah, and some of the criticism he receives is for his coach speak, saying the standard is the standard. But he really believes that. And he gets the players to believe that, to the point where, okay, if TJ Watt gets hurt, there's nobody going to be another TJ Watt, but maybe somebody can go in there and make enough plays to have a winning process. And I think, the standard is the standard. It probably works better short term than long term, but still, those players who some people never heard of come from the practice squad and contribute to victories. And I think Tomlin does that as well as any coach in football, making guys believe that they're only a play away from starting.
Oh, yeah. Now, I know you won't be on the call next year for the Steelers 2024-2025 season. How do you think they should approach the draft, though? They recently got Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and they added some really good players. I like the addition of Patrick Queen and Deshaun Elliott, because they're both just hit you in the mouth type players.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of like the Steelers brand, physical football. And in the first round, I don't think they'll go for a lineman, an offensive lineman, but they could go for a receiver unless they trade for one between now and draft day. It's supposed to be a pretty good draft for receivers. They do need help in the offensive line. The only problem with that is if you draft somebody this year, they're not going to be ready to contribute right away. There are very few Marquise Pouncey's out there. And I remember, and of course, times were different then, but in 1995, they drafted Leon Searcy as number 1, and he never did anything but wear a ball cap the whole season. He never played one snap because he was learning the game. Well, now that's accelerated, that learning process, because of free agency, the salary cap, and all of those factors that make teams develop players quicker. And there's always the chance that you lose them once you develop them. So I think there's a good balance between when young players should play and when you should reach via trade or free agency to bring somebody in to play right away. And I think they've done it pretty well. Matter of fact, I think the Steelers have handled the salary cap, which came in 1993, probably as well as anybody. I think maybe they've made 2 bad mistakes in all the years between 93 and now. And I think one was letting Chad Brown go to Seattle, but you didn't know that Greg Lloyd was going to get hurt. And I think the second was letting Rod Woodson go too early, because he still had gas in the tank. He still was able to win a Super Bowl. And he wanted outside money, but he was going to move inside. And I think the Steelers may regret having not kept him in that fashion. So other than that, I think you can look at other people, and I think you can come to the conclusion that when the Steelers say you're done, chances are you're done.
That would make a lot of sense. I recently, with Omar Khan, I really like his mentality. I want a Super Bowl, and to have a GM like that fans can trust, it just makes waiting till next season to be like, okay, this is a team that's going to compete. Even though we compete every year, you're kind of like, this dude wants to win. What's your thoughts on Omar Khan? I know you probably got to speak to him throughout the years.
Oh, yes. He's a pro. He'll do it the Steelers way, but now the Steelers way in the past is changing just because of the way the nature of the game has gone. And I think there's more of a now mentality. There's more of a, we got to, keep that Super Bowl window open at whatever cost. But one thing the Steelers have been good about, they haven't mortgaged their future too much. They haven't locked themselves into a period of time where, they're just not going to compete. For the Steelers fan, that window's always open. Now there's frustration that they haven't either made the playoffs or advanced. But I think with the way Khan is handling things, I think that's going to change rapidly.
Now, getting back to Pitt, now that you mentioned the October 23rd moment where Tony Dorsett broke the record, I have a list here of some running backs that were there. You had LaShawn McCoy, someone like Curtis Martin, and James Conner. Now, you could put Dorsett in this conversation, but he would be number one. How would you rank LaShawn McCoy, Curtis Martin, and James Conner, 1, 2, and 3? Where would they go?
Curtis Martin, because he's made the Hall of Fame. And I give Bill Parcells credit for not only seeing his ability, but making him develop as a player. At Pitt, he was hurt a lot. He didn't like the weight room, and Parcells knew that. And so when he got him at New England, he made him realize that weight room is how you're going to have the body to compete at a high level for a long period of time. Okay, Curtis, number one. I'd have to say that James Conner is number two. He's a Pitt guy. Shady McCoy's a Pitt guy. But James, when he, again, stays healthy, is as good a back as there is in the game, and has that great will to win. But I don't mean to take anything away from Shady, because that guy was pretty special for several different teams, and he played at a high level for a long time. It's a tough question, and that's my answer. And I do remember this, and it involves Myron Cope. When Shady was a freshman, I'm calling the game, and I'm calling him LaShawn McCoy. And the first commercial break in the first quarter, I see my phone, and I go to the message, and it's Myron Cope saying, "Billy, if you keep calling him LaShawn, nobody will know who he is. Call him Shady." And of course, that made a lot of sense. And Shady, great back. But Pitt's been blessed with a number of great backs. And but I'll just say this: Tony Dorsett's the finest college running back I've ever seen, and Jim Brown is the finest back I've ever seen. And I saw Jim live, so I go back that far. He was unbelievable. And interestingly, after 9 years and in relatively good health, he called it a day. Well, so did Barry Foster. So did Barry Sanders. There's something about the length of the career for a running back in the NFL. It's the max at 9. They get hit every play, or they hit every play. And not many people on the football field in any other position can say that.
I really liked watching Shady McCoy, the way he could use his elusiveness to just make somebody miss completely, not just a little bit, but he'll send you out your shoes. Watching LaShawn McCoy for the Eagles and to the Bills, he was just one of those impressive backs I could watch. You could turn on the film and you would just be like, wow. And for him to go to Pitt and dominate in the NFL like he did, it's just a testament of how good Pitt has had running backs for such a long time.
Dave Wanstead saw that talent at McDevitt, and although he had committed to USC and had an injury-prone senior year, I think Dave saw the greatness and stayed with it, and Pitt reaped the benefit. And I think Wanstead's one of the most underrated coaches that Pitt has ever had. And he's a great guy, a great coach, and a dear friend.
Now, as we wrap this up, I want to ask this one question. What is your message to Steelers Nation? You're not going to be in the broadcasting booth no more, but what would you say? Oh,
what'd you do? Turn off the recorder?
But sorry about that. My computer.
All right, we got gremlins in the technical department. Let's chase them out of there.
You're leaving the booth. What would you say to them? What made the experience well worth it in the end?
Well, my first two words were thank you for the opportunity to be involved with, to me, the greatest fandom in the NFL. And I saw it. I saw it on a regular basis as we checked into hotels, whether it be in Florida or on the West Coast or in the Midwest or in the East. Steeler fans are there, and they have to have stanchions up to keep them away from the players so the players can get to the elevators and get to their rooms. I don't think any other NFL franchise has that sort of unwavering support. And I think, Nate, there's a socioeconomic factor at play that goes back to the 70s with the collapse of the steel industry, and it converged with the Steelers getting good. And so Pittsburghers had to have something to latch on to for, a positive state of mind. And it became the Pittsburgh Steelers. And we chased a lot of young people out of the market to other parts of the country to get jobs because the steel industry was no longer providing those jobs. And those people are still there, whether they live in Florida or Oklahoma or the West Coast. The Steeler Nation is unique, and I'll miss that part of it. But guess what? I'm still part of it as a fan. And so I'll enjoy that part.
Well, as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for doing this interview. For someone young like me who's trying to make my way, this means a lot to take some time out. But thank you for everything you've done for the Pittsburgh Steelers radio broadcasting. For a fan like me of the team, it means a lot that you've painted a picture for fans like us that has not watched a game or is on the road traveling. What you've done at your job, you've always done great. And I look forward to hearing you on Pitt basketball and football this fall and into next year. So thank you so much for doing this interview.
I'm not going to go quietly into the night, but you're welcome. And good luck to you, because this is a wonderful profession. And I say to anybody who cares to listen, the easiest way to kill me is to give me a real job. I've dated that for all these years, and I plan on keeping on. Thank you.